So good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Mem Aleph. We have a wonderful Mishnah at the very top of Mem Aleph, and so we'll start there. So of course, all Mishnayos are wonderful. So Haomer Petisi as Biti Shelplon, Plito Shelploni. If I say that I seduced the daughter of so and so, if I do somebody's daughter, so we're going to deal with now the question of when do I have the ability to obligate myself to money damages? So if I say that I seduce so-and-so's daughter, so then Michelle and Bosha Sufagam al Piatzmo, then the damages, the physical damages that she endured as a result of my doing that I have to pay for. However, ve'ein Mishalem Knas. But I don't have to pay the fine. So I don't have to pay the 50 shkalim because the 50 shkalim is not meant to serve as a damage measurer. It's meant to serve as a penalty. And so as a result, as a penalty, I cannot obligate myself, just as I cannot obligate myself to lashes. If I say that I sinned, I don't on my own and volunteer the fact that I did the sin, I don't get lashes. You cannot make yourself a Russia. You can, however, obligate yourself for financial penalties. And even when you make the same statement, which we are going to effectively believe with respect to financial payments, we will not believe it with respect to penalties. And so as a result, we're going to, well, in this case, it's going to end up being a compromise. So as a result, the person ends up having to pay the humiliation and depreciation, but not.
Are we talking about bemazed
Oh yeah, sure, amazing, absolutely,
because if b'shogeg, you could just bring a korban, right, or something like that, or
absolutely. For sure, you can bring a car, but that we're talking about here, somebody did something on purpose and is now admitting it. Of course, that is the first step towards successfully doing tshuva.
but is he admitting this in court or just
Yes, he's admitting it in court.
okay, like there was a case?
Correct, exactly. Well, and he's coming to them and admitting it even before anything happened.
Confession, basically.
100%. That's exactly what he's doing. So now we're going to look at other confessions, where again there is both a financial component and both a financial component and a fine component. So ha'omer ganavti, if I say that I stole something, so then mishalem keren al piatzmo, I have to pay it back. If I stole your television and your television is worth $300, I have to pay you $300, or I have to give you back the television. But but in an ordinary case, if I get caught stealing and witnesses come and say that I stole something, then not only do I have to pay you the television back, the $300, but I also have to double it. I have to pay you a second $300 fine because that's a penalty. And if I were to steal your cow and either slaughter it or sell it, well, then I have to pay either 4 or 5 times, depending on the animal, and so as a result, so if the animal is worth $1,000, I would have to pay you $4,000 or $5,000. Yeah, that's a lot of money, right? So the point is that you shouldn't steal so right. That's the purpose of this, is to try and make sure that people don't want to steal. But if I admit it, then even if I stole your animal and sold it or slaughtered it, I will not have to pay the 4 or 5 times penalty. I will only have to pay the original amount. If I admit it, exactly. If I admit it. So now there's yes, it is 100% because I stole it. I have to.
So, but there's a maybe you shouldn't admit it then. Just see if you can get away with it, because it's a big penalty.
Well, no, you don't have to pay the penalty. That's that if you admit it.
Right, but in the other cases,
no, in all the cases, we're saying that you don't pay the penalty if you admit.
Even the Arba B'Chamisha,
Correct. That's exactly what it's saying right here. The
right?
Ein Mishalem Tashlum, that the person who says I stole it, Ein Mishalem Tashlumi Kefil doesn't pay the double, but Tashlumi Arba V'Chamisha, and doesn't pay the 4 or 5 times.
Okay, so we're trying to encourage people to.
That's exactly right. We are encouraging people to admit, so that they would that thereby will limit limits the amount of court, etc. So Hamid Shori et Ploni, if I say that my ox gored and killed somebody, oh Shoro Shel Ploni, or my ox gored and killed the ox that somebody has, Harezem Mishalem al Piatzmo. Again, you have to pay the damages. The damages part, the compensation part, you have to pay. Hamid Shori Abdo Shel Ploni. But if I say that my ox gored the servant of somebody, well, in the case of a servant, there is a fixed amount that is owed. We do not adjust the amount based on the value of the servant. We saw that referenced yesterday. So in that situation, where it says, again, Hamid Shori Abdo Shel Ploni, Ein Mishalem al Piatzmo, there he doesn't have to pay, because Zehaklal, this is the general rule. Kol HaMishalem Yaser al Masha Hizik, anyone who pays more than what he damaged, Ein Mishalem al Piatzmo, is not, that's considered a penalty, and therefore is not going to pay by his own admission. Now, if in fact, the question is okay, well, you said Kol HaMishalem Yaser al Masha Hizik, what's the story about if it's less than what was damaged? Meaning, what happens if the slave is actually worth 60 instead of 30? Does that mean that he would have to pay it? Or what if the slave is worth exactly 30? Does that change things? We're going to see that no, it will not change things. But that this is the wording that we have in our Mishnah, and we will analyze it shortly. So now this Mishnah began by talking about the case of seduction, as opposed to the case that we've been talking about most of the time is the Na'ara HaMu'urasa, the force, exactly. So here we're going to say Velisne Anasti. So we begin by asking, why didn't we talk about the violation case, the rape case? So Lomi Bai Kamar, because by telling us the story about Petisi, about the Mafate, the one who seduces, so then I know that the same thing will be true in connection with an anusa. So Lomi Bai Anasti. So as a result, it's not necessary to tell you about the violation case. Delo Kapagimla, because you're not damaging the girl's reputation, right? If in fact the person says that I seduced her, well, then clearly she had some voluntary aspect of participating in this relationship. And as a result, that although I'm admitting my own responsibility in this regard, but at the same time, you're saying, you're highlighting a negative aspect about her family, but that doesn't exist if you're saying that it was all involuntary. So that therefore, if in fact in that situation, the Mishalim Boshas Ufagam al Piatzmo, then certainly you're going to have to pay the Boshas and Pagam. So if in fact we're going to say that when she has some amount of culpability, she's going to have to pay, that the man is going to have to pay for Boshas and Pagam, well then certainly that would be the case for an anusa. Aval PTC. However, if we had it in the other order, and we say that, the kapagimla, al piatzmo. But if we didn't teach about the law about seduction, I might say where I'm negatively affecting her reputation, maybe we won't believe me at all, and we will just say nothing I say is true, and as a result, there's no payment whatsoever, even for Boshas and Pagam, Kamash Malan. That's why our Mishnah began in this way. Okay. So now, Masnisin Deloke Haitana, that now we're going to say that our Mishnah does not follow the Tana in the following brisa. The Tanya, because we learned in the brisa, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon, Af Boshas Ufagam, Einu Mishalim al Pi Atzmo. That even Boshas and Pagam you don't pay, meaning those two could be considered some kind of kanas. Lo kol hemeno sheyivgom bito shel ploni. Because, but it's not necessarily because of the kanas that we're not going to believe him, but because we're not going to believe any aspect of it's all or nothing on some level. That we're either going to believe him about the fact that the daughter was, engaged in inappropriate behavior or did not engage in inappropriate behavior. And because we want to effectively not believe the person, because we want to imagine that the woman did the right thing, and so as a result, we're not going to believe him at all. We're going to say that's not the way, that's not the way people behave. So Amr le Rav Papa la Abaye, Nicha la Ladida. What happens? What happens if she's okay with it? Meaning that she wants the penalty and she's okay with the reputational ramifications. Well, Dilma lo Nichale Lavia. Maybe it's not okay for her father. Well, Nichale Lavia mai. Well, what happens if it's okay with her father as well? So Dilma lo Nichalahu Lavdei Mishpacha. Maybe the family isn't going to be okay with it. Well, Nichalahu Lavdei Mishpacha mai. Well, what happens if the whole family in the neighborhood was okay? They understand they need the money. They don't care about the reputation. They want the money. So Iyashar Deleka Chad bin Medinas Hayam Delo Nichale. So in that, there's someone somewhere in the family is going to be upset about the implications on their family, and so as a result, we're not going to allow that. And again, this is all according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shimon. So it's not necessarily that this would follow for in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, the girls gets the Boshas and Pagam anyway. Okay. So now we said in our Mishnah the second case was Ha'omer Ganavti. So let's take a look at that. Ha'omer Ganavti Mishalem as a Karen. So again, we see that the person who says that they stole, they have to pay the principal, but they don't pay any of the penalties. So Itmar, we had a statement about that. Palga Nizka. What is the story with half damages? Meaning, when we have, let's back up and we'll remind ourselves of these laws. These laws we're going to go through in very much more detail in Seder Nezikin, and so in Baba Kama. And so as a result, here let's do the very brief introduction. And so that is that we have two kinds of animals, a tam animal and a muad animal. A tam animal is one that is just like a normal ox. It goes around and it eats stuff but does its work, etc. And and you have to watch it. Of course, it's a wild animal, but at the same time, no reputation of any damaging. And so when it does damage, when it gores, and if it gores another animal and either injures it or kills it, then the obligation on the owner of the animal that did the goring is to pay half the damages. That's for a tam animal. However, if that tam animal gored 3 times and it gets the reputation of a goring cow, a goring ox, well, then it becomes muad, and then the damage is 100%. And then you have to pay 100%. And so the question that the Gemara is asking is, and it seems clear to the Gemara that the 100%, if it's a muad cow, it's clearly damages. And that if you admit that your muad cow did the damages, so then clearly you would need to pay 100%. But what happens if it's a tam cow or tam ox? Then what's the damages that you'd need to pay? So Rav Papa Amar Palga Nizka Mamona. So yeah, it's a good question, right? So Rav Papa says that half damages are considered compensation. It's not a penalty, it's a compensation. And so if you admit it, you would have to pay it. And Rav Huna braid the Rav Yoshua Amar Palga Nizka Kanasa. Rav Huna says that it's not a compensation, but it is actually a penalty. So Rav Papa Amar Palga Nizka Mamona. So Kasavar Stam Shvarim La Becheska Shimur Kaimi. And so Rav Papa says that it's compensation because regular ox are not, are not considered, they need to be guarded, but they're not. Uvedinhu to Mishalim Kule. And so as a result, you should have to pay the full amount. After all, you're not watching it as closely as you would a regular ox. And so, but but the Torah took pity on the person, and Hashem says, no, you don't have to pay the full damages. Da kasi lo Torah, because the person who owns it, has not been warned. So Rav Huna, Rav Yoshua, Amar Palga Nizka Knasa. Rav Huna, however, says that no, half the damages are actually a penalty. No, a regular ox is watched well enough that you should not have to pay any damages. So, and so as a result, uvedinhu delo lishalim klal, he really shouldn't have to pay anything. V'rachmanahu dekanse ki hecha denitre l'sore, that in order to make sure that he guard his ox even better, we're going to have him pay the penalty of 50%. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to try 4 different proofs, and they are the siman for them. The mnemonic to remember them is hizik ma behemis klal. So these are the 4 indications, and now we're going to have 4 different proofs, efforts to try and prove that it's actually compensation. What we're going to find is none of the proofs work. Actually, the final proof is actually going to be considered a good proof, and then we're going to say that the halacha is the opposite. So let's see, and we'll go through it. So proof number 1, Tanan, hanizak v'hamazik b'tashlumin. So again, this is hizik is the reminder for this one, right? So the damaged and the damager both are obligated in some aspect of payment. So what does that mean? So bishlam alamanda amar palga nizka b'mona, if you say that the 50% is actually a sense of compensation, hainu d'shayach nizuk b'tashalumin, right? Because this is how the damaged party is part of the compensation, because he only gets 50% of his damages, and he should really get 100%. Elamanda amar palga nizka knasa. But if you say that the 50% that is being paid is actually a penalty, well then hashdal delavdi de kashakel. Well then, what does it mean that the damaged party is part of the making of the payment? B'tashlumani say, what is their payment for that person? So lo nitzrucha el lefagas nevela. So it comes to tell us about the loss associated with the nevela. So let's go through what that rule is outside, and then we'll see it inside. The rule is the following: if my ox goes and gores your ox, but we'll just, for simplicity's sake, we'll say that both oxen are worth 100. Okay, and now your ox, as a dead ox, to sell it for animal meat, is worth $4. So how much damage have I done to you? 100 minus 4 is 96. Now that $4 animal, the leftover animal, you get to keep that, and you're going to sell it. But you're not going to get to sell it until the court case. And in the court case, that's going to take a couple of days until we come to court and all that. So now, 3 days later, we go to, it was Monday afternoon that we had that my ox gored your ox. And now it's Thursday morning, and we go to court, and they say, yes, I have to pay you half of 96 because my ox was a tom ox. Half of 96 is 48. And so as a result, I have to pay you 48 damage. But at the same time, between Monday afternoon, when my ox gored your ox, and now Thursday morning, when you can finally go ahead and sell it, well, now that ox is only worth 2. So when I pay you the $48, and you only end up with $50, you don't end up with $52, which would have been the half of the damages, right? So as a result, you end up with something that's worth half your cow, but just because of the numbers worked out that way. But the point is that that loss, that additional loss of 2, was on you. And so that's what we're referring to, that even the damaged party is part of the payment. So
you're assuming that these cases were resolved that quickly, like within a week?
Yeah, I'm assuming that
Because like in the Bronx County, you can't
oh
get.
yeah, but this is your
Yeah, but
local Beit Din. They probably sat
that's our
every.
local civil Beit Din, and you can't get, you know,
That's true. That's true. Obviously, I think we're
why
in a
would
much
you
more.
get it so quick? I mean, there could be a lot of cases, and
There could be. You're absolutely right that there could be. This was only the purpose of my saying it was only for by way of example.
There were
right.
no lawyers back then to clog up the system.
Yes,
No
that
offense,
was
no
James.
offense to current parties.
Yeah. Okay. Here you can see James. Hi, James. Okay. All right. So now everybody's happy that James is here, and we're all happy that Hanan is here as well, and Stan. Okay. So that is point number one. So again, so now let's go through it inside. So pras nevela, what is this depreciation? So let's go through it. So Tanina, we have a Mishnah. Okay. Tashlumi nezek, when it comes to the compensation for the damages, milamid shahabalim mitabalim bin nevela, right? It teaches that the owner of the dead animal has to deal with the carcass, meaning that the owner is going to cover the only half, either for Tom, half the damages, half the distance between the value of the carcass, or for a muad, the full distance. But the bottom line is that he is going to lose whatever loss in value there will exist between. I'm not 100% sure that the guy needs to wait for the court case, but it could just be that by the time the local, constabulate, exactly, the carcass is rotting, by the time the valuation that is paid is the valuation at the time that the carcass dies. That's when the damages is determined, not by when we actually do the selling. That's because we're going to effectively put on the owner of the gored ox, we're going to put on that owner the obligation to minimize the damage that's associated with him. I got to remember this because I got to send it to somebody. Okay, so all right, so chada betam v'chada b'muad. So here we have in the end, this same Mishnah, now we're asking, how could this be the explanation? Because in one case we're talking about a tam, and in one talking, I'm sorry, and this is true both for a tam and for a muad, and we need to be told about both. Tam, because if in fact it was if in fact we only learn this lesson in connection with Tom, Mishum Kasi Lo Iyad. That's because the person who owned the goring animal, me, I was never warned about it. And so as a result, you, the victim, should end up having the responsibility to sell your animal as quickly as possible, but we don't want to put any extra on me. But Aval Muad Diyada Emalo. But maybe if my animal was a muad, I would be obligated to pay you for any depreciation in the value of the cadaver. On the other, right? But and if you only told me about muad, the iyashmein and muad, and if you only had told me about muad, mishum dekam mishalim kule. Well, that's because I'm already paying you so much. I'm paying you the full damages. You should take responsibility for your own carcass. All right, but about Tom, aim low, but maybe because I'm only paying you 50% of the damages when it comes to Tom, so you're already suffering. So as a result, maybe we would say not. So therefore, srika. But the bottom line is no proof from the fact that we say that that the damaged is paying part of the cost. That is not going to be a proof for Rav Papa.
I thought the owner of the muad ox keeps the nevela.
No, that what we're saying here is no. And I understand why you're saying that, because the psukim can be read that way. But I think we're going to see that it's not, in fact, that the animal remains, the carcass remains remains the. I mean, I'm sure it's a machlokas, but I think the carcass remains and certainly what we are saying here is that the carcass remains owned by the victim. Okay, so now case number 2. So the Gemara attempts to prove, from another Mishnah that again that like Rav Papa, that the half damages are compensation, not a penalty. So Tashma. So ma bein tam lemuad. What's the difference between a tam and a muad? So shatam mishalim chatzin nezik megufo. Well, the difference is that the tam pays 50% of the damages and the muad pays 100% of the damages. Umuad mishalim nezik shalom min ha'aliyah. And in addition, the muad pays full damages from the best of the property. And shatam mishalim chatzin nezik megufo, meaning that the maximum that I could have to pay is the value of my ox. So, for example, if my ox is worth 100 and it goes and kills your ox that's worth 400, and now your ox is, we'll just assume that your ox is worth 0 as it really mutilated your ox. So as a result, there was nothing left for it at the end. Even the carcass is not worth anything. So just to make it simple. So I should have to pay you 200, right? Because my ox is a tom, exactly. If it was a muad, I would pay you 400, and I would pay you from the best of my property. But because my ox was a tom, I'm only owe you 200, but I have a cap. My cap is the value of my ox, and my ox is only worth 100. So as a result, I would only end up having to pay you 100. And so, yes, that would be a tough luck situation. So I would be lucky that I only have to lose my ox. I don't have to lose anything more.
Why should it matter what the value of your ox is as for his damages?
Why is your question? Why limit it?
Yeah.
Well, my understanding of
if you have an old ox that's not worth so much, doesn't matter to the victim. He doesn't care. If some car crashes to you, why should it matter if it was an old car or a new car?
100%. And that is, it makes sense. Your argument, of course, makes sense and is true when. Did I freeze? Do you hear me?
What?
Do you hear me? Wait a second. We have to the internet. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, you're okay.
Okay, great. All right. So when my ox is muad, obviously what you say makes total sense, and indeed I would be obligated for the full damages. When my ox is a tom, it is essentially, in my view, this is my personal take of this, is that it is a insurance policy, that this is a communal insurance, that essentially the likelihood of my ox goring your ox is the same as your ox goring my ox. And so as a result, we are just going to view the entire episode as if it was a random thing and not anything intentional. And so as a result, and there are, automobile insurance systems out there that are not quite this extreme, but that do try to do that and limit the entire system to only compensatory damages and no physical pain and suffering, etc., like that, so as to sort of understand that it's all accidents, that nobody's doing these things on purpose. And so that's the way I'm viewing it. But the bottom line is that yes, in fact, a tom is capped by the value of the animal, whereas in a muad, it's whatever property I have, I will owe it to you.
They're making the person whole, because even though the goring ox was 200, your ox is 100. The value, you're getting the same value for your ox in a sense.
Right. I mean, the bottom line is what you look at. You basically, in the tom situation, we take the two oxen together, and we basically end up saying we're just going to split the whole thing. We're going to basically say it didn't make a difference whether it was your ox goring my ox or my ox goring your ox. We're just going to say that was random. That was just random. We're just going to split the difference. That's the basic understanding of tam. That's how I understand it. All right. But the point is v'lo katani, what did we not list in this list of differences between a muad and a tam? We didn't say shatam eino mishalem al piatzmo. We didn't say that the person who admits that their ox gored, even if it's a tam, will have to pay. Umuad mishalem al piatzmo, and that a muad does have to pay, right? Shatam eino mishalem al piatzmo, umuad mishalem al piatzmo. If you in fact believe that the tam, the payment, the half payment for a tam is a penalty, well, then we should say that there's a difference between these two cases. That one is one if you admit it you don't owe, and one if you admit you do owe. So Tana V'Shire. So the Gemara says no, not a good proof, because maybe this Mishnah left out other categories, and there's an idea that if a Mishnah left out at least one thing, then it must have left out more than that. Otherwise, it didn't leave out anything. So it's either complete or it's got several things missing. So my shire to high shire. So if you say that it's left something out, what did it leave out? So shire chatzik kofer, that there is this idea that a tam, the question, what happens if a tam animal kills a person, as opposed to a muad animal? If my muad animal kills somebody, God forbid, well, then I have to pay the full value of that person as an atonement. Now, if in fact, however, my animal was tam, I don't pay anything. I don't pay even the half. Okay. So that's another difference, because, right, it's a big difference, because and it's not just a 50%. It's not a 50%. So imishum chatzik kofer lav shiyurahu. Well, one second. If in fact you do have to pay 50, well, then that is not going to be an omission. So Hamani, Rabbi Yossi Aglilihi. Well, we can say that this Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Amar Tam Mishalim Chatzik Kofer. So essentially, that in fact we now have two views of this Mishnah, that effectively one view for Rav Papa and one view for Rav Huna. So for Rav Papa, that this Mishnah is talking about, is saying that in fact this cow, that the reason that it doesn't mention that admitting is a difference between tam and muad is because admitting is not a difference between tam and muad. Because if you admit, you would be obligated to pay the 50% for the tam, and it must be Rabbi Yossi Aglili, because Rabbi Yossi Aglili is the one who also says that a tam pays half kofar, that if the person's animal goes and gores somebody, the person and kills somebody, you're going to have, even if it's a tam animal, the tam animal owner is going to have to pay half the damages. So as a result, the Mishnah is listing everything. It is all the differences, and it's totally fine according to Rav Papa. And according to Rav Huna, well, we omitted two different categories. Our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and our Mishnah is omitting two different categories. One is that the tam pays half kofar, because in fact the tam does not pay any kofar if my tam were to gore somebody and kill somebody, and if it was a tam animal, it would not have to pay anything. And it omits the fact that if I admit, I don't have to pay when it comes to tam, because a tam payment is a penalty. So as a result, effort number 2 has failed as well. Now we go to effort number 3. So, and again, effort number 2 was the mnemonic was ma, and this was also ma bain tam lemuad. So that was the ma in that mnemonic. So tashma. Now we go to the third. Hemi shori es ploni. If I say that my ox killed somebody, oh shoro shel ploni, or killed, and in fact it's our Mishnah that we're quoting now, or my ox killed somebody's ox, harei zeh mishalem al pi atzmo, malav betam. Isn't our Mishnah talking about a tam? And so as a result, isn't our Mishnah a proof for Rav Papa? So lo b'muad, we can say no, our Mishnah is talking about a muad animal, and that's why when I admit I have to pay. But if it were tam, then you would not have to admit. Well, one second, adatani seifa Avdo shalploni eno mishalam al pi atzmo. But 1 second, if I say that I killed my ox killed so and so slave, somebody's slave, then I don't pay. Niflog v'nisne b'dida. Why do you have to tell me about a new case of a muad animal killing somebody's slave? Say, just highlight b'med dvarim amurim b'muad aval tam eno mishalam al piatzmo. If you want to show me that there's a case where I don't have to pay, just change the muad animal to a tam animal. Why did you change the victim, instead change the animal? Well, the Gemara is going to answer kula b'muad kamairi. Well, the answer is that we didn't want to change the perpetrating animal. We wanted to leave the perpetrating animal as a muad throughout. So as a result, it's totally consistent. We're talking about a muad throughout the Mishnah, according to Rav Huna. All right, so now we try the fourth and final proof. This is going to be successful. So Tashma Zaklal Kol HaMishalim Yaser Al Masha Hizik. Anybody, this is the end of our Mishnah, right? Anybody who pays more than what he damaged, Eino Mishalim Al Piatzmo, that he won't have to pay if he admits it. Because hapachos mimasha hizik mishalim al piatzmo. What's the implication of that? If you have to pay less, well, then you do have to pay. So lo tema hapachos mimasha hizik. Nah, you could say that if it's also less than what he damaged, he also you don't have to say that it means that I have to pay. Ella ema hakima shehizik mishalim al piatzmo. You could say that as long as it's like what you pay, what the damage is, you pay by your own admission. Aval pachos mai. But what about if it's less? If it's less, you also don't have to pay. So 1 second. Why not say that specifically? Meaning, why say the more? Why not just say, as long as you're not paying the amount, then it's considered a penalty, and therefore you don't pay based on your own admission. Demashma pachos umashma yaser, and that would imply that if it's more or less, then you don't end up having to pay. So to yufta, in fact, this seems to be a contradiction. V'hilchasa halganizka kinasa, and yet, notwithstanding the fact that we just proved that it seems like there was a tiyuvta, that they were saying that damages are in fact compensation. We now say that in fact that half damages are a penalty. To Yuvta v'hilchasa? 1 second, the Gemara points that out. That doesn't make any sense. You just said that it was a tiyuvta, that in fact, which suggests that it should be a compensation, half damages. But then you say v'hilchasa, it's a kanas. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because why was this refuted? Right? It was because our Mishnah did not say that it's as that a compensation is when it's as much as damage, when it's an approximation for the damage. But that actually would not be a fact, a rule, because because there's another category. So we've talked about, and again, we'll get all of this detailed when we get to Seder Nezikin, but we've been talking about goring. But there are other kinds of damages. And for other kinds of damages where it's a normal thing that happens, you have to pay full damages. Like if my animal goes into your field and eats your food, so then I have to pay the full damages. But there's also things where it's and we're going to talk about it now, tsroros, where you've got these little pebbles and you have an animal walking. And what happens when an animal walks on a little pebble that's round and it gets it on the edge? The pebble shoots out. Now, what happens if that pebble that was trampled shoots out and breaks your vase? And so the answer is that there's half damages in that situation. And so that is basically the Hilchas Gemirihu La Dimamonahu, and we have an oral tradition that tsroros, which are considered a part of the regel damages of trampling, that is considered something that's compensation. And then the Shum Haki Lo Katani. And so as a result, if I admit that my animal stepped on a pedal and it broke, and that pebble shot out and broke your vase, that is going to be compensation damages that I have to pay, and I pay you 50% of those compensation damages. And so as a result, Mishum Haki Lo Katani, and so as a result, our Tana could not, in fact, make a categorical statement that anytime the payment is either less or more, it is considered a penalty. Because in fact, there are times where it could be less, where it could even be the same half penalty that you have for a tom. It could be a half penalty, and it would be considered compensatory. So Vahasha de Amar Palka Nizka.
Like insurance.
What was that?
That's also like an insurance policy, so to speak. Like,
yeah, I mean, this one is a much harder one because I don't know that you have. This is sort of like, but yes, I do sort of see this as a different category of insurance, but I haven't really thought through it completely. I did not remember the halachas of Troros before. So, but the bottom line is that it does seem like it's when it's not something that could reasonably be watched, we're going to say that we're just going to, here it's not two animals where we could say, oh, well, just flip the animals. It could have gone the other way. Here, it's definitely in one direction, but we're going to say that it's sufficiently unlikely that we're not going to make you responsible for the full damages. We're going to only make you responsible.
Sounds like strict liability with a cap.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's a very interesting system. Some of the more common dealing with, have certainly been dealt with in tort legal literature. But here, I think that this is definitely an interesting one. All right,
it's just the cost of doing business in the market.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. We need to understand that exactly that these kinds of things happen to you if you're a seller in the marketplace, because animals are going to be walking by. And so if you've got your vases out for sale, you have to recognize that those vases out for sale could be damaged by a stone banging onto it. So either, it essentially causes everybody to have to protect, so put a guard up, to make sure that you minimize the likelihood of damage.
You're only going to be compensated for half the value of the vase.
Exactly, because you're only going to be compensated for half the value. Exactly. So, all right. So now, v'hasha de'amar palga nizka kanasa, hai kalba de'achal imri. If we have, now that we talked that half damages is considered a punitive payment, so is considered a penalty. So hai kalba de'achal imri. If you have a dog that ate an entire sheep, meaning it killed the sheep and then it ate it. Vishunra de'achal tarnagoli rivrve, or a cat that ate a humongous chicken. So the point is that these are very unlikely things to do. And so when it's unlikely, it gets placed into the category of keren, of goring, instead of the ordinary category of shane, eating. So mishunahu v'lo magbinin b'vavel. And so as a result, this is considered an unusual damage, and unusual damages is we don't collect them in Bavel. And the bottom line is that in Bavel, they didn't collect extraordinary damages, and they also didn't collect penalties. But now we're going to call this an extraordinary damage. So aval zutre orchehu. However, when it was a small thing, if it was a normal, and so normal for these animals to kill it, so umakbinan, then we would collect it, because again, that's the normal damage, and so as a result, you'd have to pay. The e-tapas. Now, what happens if the person who did the damage, who was damaged, goes and grabs the property of the owner of the dog or the cat that did the damage? So loma kinan mine. Well, we won't take it away from him. The amar akba'uli zimna la Eretz Yisrael. And if the guy says, I want to go to Eretz Yisrael and collect, so then makbi'inan lai. So we will help him collect it, meaning we will set the court date up. So if my cat ate your sheep, which is my dog ate your sheep, and you're like, I need that money, I'm going to take you to court in Israel. The court will in Bavel will force me to go to set up that date in Israel. the elo azel, and
Years.
correct, the elo azel. And if I don't go, if I don't set up that date and go, then I get put into cherim. I'm going to be put into, I'm going to be excommunicated. And actually, either way, we're going to excommunicate me if I keep my dog and cat. Because the court is going to tell me I got to get rid of this animal. This animal is dangerous. So the Rabbi Nassan, because there's a teaching of Rabbi Nassan, Tanya, Rabbi Nassan Omer, Minayin shel yigadel adam kelev ra b'tok beito. How do I know that somebody should not raise a dangerous dog in their home? So v'lo yamit sulam ra'ua b'tok beito, and shouldn't keep a rickety, ladder. So Shneamar, v'lo sasim damim b'veisecha. You shouldn't put blood in your house. This is the law of having a fence around a flat roof. And the point is you shouldn't create dangerous situations. Obviously, there are lots of different applications of this, including the modern applications associated with, certain kinds of dangerous dogs. But the bottom line is that this is, with this way we'll finish Elunaris, Hadron Alach Elunaris, Hadron Alach Elunaris, Hadron Alach Elunaris. Now, the interesting thing is, one quick last point that we'll conclude with this is that Rashi, the way I've described this class Gemara is according to Rashi, who says that when you grabbed something that belonged to me, you just grabbed money of mine or something that belonged to me. It wasn't the animal itself. Rabbeinu Tam says no, that the only thing that you could grab is the object that did the damage. So if my cat ate your chickens, that they were, that were ridiculously large, and so you would never expect my cat to do so. So you could grab my cat and sell my cat. Or if my dog ate your sheep, that's it. Because otherwise, the Rabbeinu Tam, this is the last Tosos in the parak. Rabbeinu Tam points out that if, let's say, you grabbed instead of $100, you grabbed $1,000. Well, then I would take you to court and I would try and get back my $900. And so, according to Rabbeinu Tam, that would effectively involve the court deciding the value of your animal and effectively imposing on me the fine. And we said that the courts in Babel don't do that. Now, Rashi and others disagree with that attitude and say, no, I'm collecting what you stole from me, and what you stole from me is everything above the value of your animal. So in any event, that's just an interesting distinction that is worthy of note, that's the final Tosos of our parak. So with that, we will conclude for today, and we will pick up, God willing, tomorrow.
One question, David. Sorry.
Well, go ahead.
So it's the law in Babel was different than the law in Israel?
That's correct, with respect to Kanas and with respect to these unusual actions.
Usually, don't we say that the law of the place where the occurrence occurred is what governs? You can't go forum shopping for another place where you can get a better outcome?
Yes, that is true. However, here we're dealing with Jewish law in both locations. So it's not, when we say Dina de Machusa Dina, that.
No, I'm not talking about that.
You're talking about more generally about not forum shopping.
Jewish law is different in one place than in another place, right?
Is the law different, or the courts just impose it differently?
Yeah, I don't think that the law is different. I think that the court, the way I understand the reasoning of the court system is that the court system in Bavel, at least at this time that we're talking about here, it was less sophisticated. It was viewed as less sophisticated, and due to that lesser sophistication, they didn't feel comfortable deciding cases of fines and extraordinary damages. And so therefore they would be fine with you taking that case back to Eretz Yisrael, but they would not allow you to do it locally.
The cost of going all the way from Bavel to Israel would offset whatever gain.
I'm sure you're right.
If you didn't go.
Yeah, but if you didn't go, so then right. Right. So it was, you know, remember that the cost got imposed on the other person as well. So, you know, 100%. Well, no, it was not. It's a,
Miles.
it's 600 miles. It was considered a, you know, a 2 to 4 week trip. So, you know, yeah, something like that.
So you're going
All
anyway.
right, I'm gonna close the recording.